All right. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. So thank you everyone for joining us here today for this fireside chat. I'm very, very excited for this one today. So our title is Nature's Blueprint, the Dance of Masculine and Feminine at Work. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a moment. But before we jump in, just really quick, I'm Jennifer Ulrich, Vice President of Advisory at Course Centric, and very excited to support ISM New Jersey chapter in this webinar as an extension of my role as the co-chair on the Women in Leadership Conference that we hold in October. A little spotlight promo for everybody in New Jersey coming up this October 22nd and 23rd. And wanted to introduce my participant today. So Carolyn Gaudy is a former global marketing CRM director at Tiffany and Company. But she's transformed her burnout experience into something to really help others as an executive coach. She's also a best-selling author of Stress-Free Wedding, where she guides professionals to embrace their authentic leadership and drives both business growth and personal fulfillment. Essentially, Carolyn wears many hats and does many amazing things in her day to day. But one of those things is really understanding the masculine and feminine energies and how they play on each other and how to best leverage them. So that's, I think, a big component of our session today is that it's less about when we think about those components and gender, it's about the energies and how each of us has those within and how we leverage those, that full spectrum of energy to really transform not only our careers, but our personal lives and our overall success in life. So, again, very excited for our chat today. Before we jump in, just a couple things. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them throughout. You can drop them into the chat. We'll do our best to answer throughout, or we'll definitely have some time at the end where we'll be able to do a little bit of Q&A. All right. So with that, I am actually going to have Carolyn give a little bit, probably a better introduction than I did from my little choppiness there, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do every day.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you, Kathy, and all the ISM team for having me. I'm very excited. Well, yeah, I followed a very traditional career path in corporate until I burned out, and that burnout became kind of the wake up call and the realization that what always lit me up was people and helping people. I chose CRM in my marketing journey because it has a lot to do with understanding people or clients and then and serving the best experience possible for them, and came along with also the leadership aspects of leading teams. CRM has this uh, it's not unique, but the particularity of really having to deal with strategy and creative and operations and IT. And so you need to understand many different aspects of marketing and business in general to really make the most of the position. So essentially, people has always been kind of the umbrella topic throughout my life. And so I wrote this book to support people getting married because my husband, being a wedding photographer, I'd really experienced so many of his clients struggling with stress and overwhelm, and always thought I would be a great resource for them. That's how it came about. And yes, very excited to be here and kind of share what I think is a topic that is not yet talked about enough in the workplace, understood enough at least,
Mm-hmm.
that I think play a big role in how we can, successfully navigate our own journeys and better connect with one another.
Great. And well, I think it's always interesting to hear how someone like yourself pivots into something that they're more passionate about. It's also kind of disheartening to hear that it had to happen as a relate as a component of I was just so stressed out I couldn't take it anymore and took a different path. But I love hearing these stories of, you know, where you landed because of that. It's always awesome. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you do on the executive coaching side and kind of highlight what are the common challenges that your clients encounter? So, why do they pick up the phone and call you?
Yes. And that's so true, right? It takes typically something challenging or hitting a wall for us as human being to look for support. Um,
Hmm.
so, a lot of my clients come in because they feel stuck, right? They feel like they are either they've reached the top of what they believe was success and still can't feel quite fulfilled or successful. So it looks good on the outside, but on the inside, there's something missing
Hmm.
is a very common theme. Definitely the theme I encounter when I burned out. Um, there's I have a few more clients now, which I'm very excited about, who are have everything, amazing, look well, everything goes, fabulously for them, but they crave for more. They have an itch for something else and something more, and they just want to reach the next level.
Hmm.
And they understand that they can go very far by themselves, but like any Olympians or champion, having a team to support and help them see what they can't see for themselves is extremely helpful. And then there is also this, what I call this transition phase of either you reach a new level. So I have a lot of recently promoted people who reach out feeling, it's like everything. And the same for the wedding, actually. Like you get engaged,
Hmm.
you're like, oh my God, I just got
Yeah.
engaged or I just got promoted. There's this high. And as I often share, my experience of when I got promoted to director, that I have the very crisp memory of me closing the door of my new office, sitting at my desk, and then feel like, oh my God, what do I do now? Because the
The
team,
weight just crashes down on you, right?
yes, crashed down. And I had built a
Yeah.
team and
Yeah.
grew a team. I was doing an amazing job, a better job than I could do myself.
Hmm.
But now I was promoted to be this leader, and I was like, what do I do? There was no blueprint. I
Hmm.
Doing more of what I did wasn't going to get me anywhere. So I feel like a lot of people have this realization. You want the promotion, you want the next level so much in
Right.
your job. And then you realize that, oh my God, there's another mountain for me to climb and that we are not necessarily prepared for. And so that's where I come as a support and an advisor to these people.
Okay. Can you tell us maybe just share like what are the most common, I guess, kind of next steps there, right? So when you talk about ways that you support them, can you tell us a little bit more about maybe just give us an example or a case study, right, of how you kind of work through some of those challenges?
Yes. I work in a very personalized way. One of
Okay.
the common thread that I have noticed is most people come in with this discomfort or this hunger for more. When it comes to actually crystallizing what is it exactly they want, there's
Mm,
often a lack of clarity. There's often this, what I say to my client is when your vision is so clear that if you share it with three people and they were to draw or describe with their own words what you want to accomplish, we should get to the exact same answers everywhere. It shouldn't feel there should be any gaps, any uncertainty. And so that's typically where I start working with my client, getting super clear onto what do they actually want and why they want it. Because, a very recent example, I have this wonderful woman, very successful in her career and a mother and very close to her family who lives abroad and she wants to spend a lot of time with her family as much as
mhm,
possible. And her goal was, I want to make just more money. It doesn't matter for me the title, the company, like she's in a set industry, but I just want to make more money. And I told her, I was like, great. But money cannot be the end goal. And she was like, it is. I was like, no, no, no. Your end goal is you want to have the money to spend into visiting your family and spending more quality time. She was like, oh yeah. Yeah. So money becomes a means to an end. And so sometimes helping really understand what is the end goal behind the vision, make extraordinary conversation. And another recent client came in, and I asked her, what does she want? And she said, um, there's this dream that I'm afraid to dream. And her dream to afraid to dream was to write a book.
Oh, wow.
And we're 8 weeks in our collaboration, and she did it. She wrote it already. Like so,
Wow. Very
it's
cool.
there's so much magic coming, and that's why I'm saying it's also very personalized because sometimes she never came with the intention of I'm going to write a book within 2 months. She
Mhm.
was just feeling like incomplete and just sometimes surfacing some of these questions, asking these questions surface some very interesting outcomes.
Oh, no, that's really awesome to hear. And I completely agree. I think sometimes we're all just driving so hard and fast in our day to day, and we know we're working towards something, but when somebody steps back and says, "Well, what is that thing?" It's like your mind goes blank. You're like, "Well, I mean, I know, but I don't know, and I can't articulate it." So yeah, I agree. It's sometimes just a matter of asking a couple of questions to be able to get it out there, and it helps to clarify. I think that's a great word, clarify, right? And just get it on paper to give you more momentum and motivation towards that goal. Excellent. So I want to make sure we get to our main topic for today, which
Excellent.
is the masculine and feminine energies. And could you tell us a little bit more about your perspective or your point of view on that concept, basically?
Yes. So I was, introduced to feminine, masculine energy, yin yang, etc., like yang, but
Mhm.
without fully understanding what it meant and how to really understand and use it to my advantage. And I don't mean it in a malicious way, but really for my own well-being, but also to really
Yeah.
connect with others in a meaningful way. And it's become I had two recent events where it appeared really clearly that there was something that we were not being, at least I wasn't being fully conscious about, and I don't hear much people talk about. And that now it keeps coming up in kind of almost all of my conversations and sessions with clients. I went in a retreat held by my mentor, a wonderful man. I absolutely adore him. I've grown so much under his mentorship. And this retreat was about 7 men and 3 women. Um, my mentor is, a white male who grew up in middle class, and he has a very fabulous journey. And one of the female in the retreat asked him, she was struggling a lot with where she was at in her career, and obviously hearing his adventures and how he left a very high position in a massive organization to just take a bike and go on adventures with his kids. She'd ask him, like, how did you find the confidence to just quit it all and do this, not knowing what would come next? And I listened to him answer, and I could see her not clicking. And I knew in my heart, I was like, I knew that if I was in her shoes, I would not be able to comprehend what he was saying. And so we have a beautiful relationship, him and I. And I asked him, I was like, can I add a little feminine twist to it? He was like, oh, please do. And I essentially said to the group, it was like, most most of us grew up with some level of privilege, being the color of our skin in certain countries, in certain areas, being our gender, being our, the wealth that we have or doesn't, etc. All of this is something that we take for granted because it's part
Mhm.
of what we know as a reference. And in that moment, I essentially highlighted this to him for her, and he
Right,
knows.
right.
But we take for granted what we our privileges. And I kind of gave her a twist to what I was hearing. And I could see her like, oh yes, now I get it. Right. Like, and so to me, it's constantly checking in the point of view that we use when we interact with people. And so for me, it's been my personal realization has been this entire society was built with male energy and masculine and men in mind, right? Like to this day, I believe the average temperature for thermostat in offices is set to for a male body to feel at
Hmm.
ease. And so most women feel cold in open space because the temperature is too cool for female bodies, right? Like there's so many little things that continuously are being built based on masculine energy that it sometimes feels hard when you come from a feminine energy, and that's regardless of gender, as you were
Right.
mentioning. When you operate more from your feminine energy, then there's always this discomfort, this gap, this thing that doesn't fully align. And so I think I believe part of the burnout I experience is part of not fully understanding that gap and not fully knowing as a woman who is more naturally in her feminine energy, how to bring that to the workplace in a favorable way. And instead, we are being bombarded by information more or less consciously that the way to succeed is to operate from your masculine energy. But along the way, you kind of lose part of who you are. Whether you're a man, a woman, or you're any gender you associate
Mhm.
yourself with, there's part of you that can't fully feel themselves in the workspace because it's set by masculine roles in a way.
Yeah. And then I know a lot of studies show that empathy is one of the most critical aspects of being a good leader is leading with empathy. And we find that, while that's not gender specific, again, women tend to lead with more empathy, right? So, thinking about like that just that as an example, right? How do you bring that into the conversation with those you're coaching, right? To be able to tap into those things in the right way at the right time, kind of putting all of the pieces together in the right way.
It's often for me, it's more getting really conscious of when you operate this way. So it would be actually interesting to look back at my webinar with Brendan last year, but I'm pretty sure that I was still leaning very much forward when I was
Mhm.
talking, because that's like the masculine energy of just trying to get to something. The feminine energy is a lot more in flow, a lot more grounded.
Mhm.
There's this analogy that I was taught and that I keep bringing up, and we talked about it in preparation for this meeting, which is when trying to understand what masculine and feminine energy is, there's a beautiful analogy with reproduction, right? When you consider reproduction in the human, for humans, the woman produce one egg per cycle per month, and the only goal of that egg is to just wait to receive. It's just to be and that's it. There's nothing else expected than just being and receiving. On the other end, sperm and spermatozoids their goal is to go for it, to be the first one. It's about speed, it's about winning, and that's how they're built. And so female and like feminine and masculine energies are like this. And so that's why the world today, performance, succeed, like
Mhm.
success, KPIs, all of this is going for the egg, right? Like it's a straight line, it's very linear.
Yeah.
And on the other end, on the feminine side, it is more about receiving and just more being, just being essentially.
Mhm.
And it's to me, the first step is noticing when am I in this phase where like I feel like I have to go, it has to be linear, it has to be performance driven. It's just like very intellectual and it's not so much coming from a place of love and heart and intuition. I think the next stage is once you start noticing where you're at, it's also beautiful to start noticing where are other people, what are other people operating from? Because
Right.
the thing with energies is has to have some form of balance. We hate this word these days, but it has to come from balance. It's a polarity. The plus attract the minus, and
Right.
same for relationships. And so if you in my marriage, for example, I started noticing how much I had been operating from a masculine energy, which then for my husband forced him into a feminine energy when I was very much in the masculine, which is an imbalance for him, who typically tends to operate more for a masculine. And that is always when we have conflict and fight and are not in sync, right? So
Mm,
the moment you start noticing how your energy affect others, what is the energy other people operate from, and how, so if you have a very masculine energy boss, being a woman or man or transgender or whatever, it you want to understand what is, if they operate from masculine energy, then you want to show up in your feminine energy to be more in this kind of flow. If you show up in a very masculine energy, then you're going to butt heads, and so you're not going to really get to what you want or get to a very empathetic and deep conversation with that person. So to me,
mm,
the most important step is noticing it in yourself, in
right.
others, and then starting to find, for me, it would be find a role model to kind of learn how to operate in the energy that you want to operate from and you haven't operated from a lot, to start then mimicking a little bit of what they do so that you can start going into this dance.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I think whether you want to or not, you tend to mimic the behaviors of those you're around the most, right? And it was interesting. I had this situation recently at work where I had multiple levels on a call, and you could see that the leader was setting a tone, and then his direct report was mimicking that tone, and her direct report was mimicking that tone, and then there was and it's your outside in perspective, and you're watching it happen, and at times those in the mix don't recognize it's happening because they're doing it so organically. So I have so many questions for you, but I'll try to keep it. I'm curious for the audience if you can give us some examples, like to contextualize a little bit. So when we think about looking for masculine or feminine energies, is there a way to give us some examples of what that might look like in the room, virtual or live, right? Yeah, if you could maybe try to articulate that a bit.
Yes, there's many signals, I would say. And there's another layer above and beyond masculine and feminine that comes to mind. But essentially, wanting to, like, again, being towards this performance. So wanting to take a lot of space, a lot of time interrupting, or not even interrupting, but like uh, be going on monologues for a long time, or
Mhm,
like you can start to notice, okay, like this is going to be their way or no way. So that kind of give you some signals for yourself, for others. Um, I found one of the best example I have encountered was coming from a leader in at Tiffany, and she had this ability, and that's always the person I think about. That's why I'm always referring to kind of mimicking, and we have obviously celebrities and stuff that we can
mhm,
look to do that. But she had always this very powerful way to walk into a room, not say a word, but she was just coming in happy, in like very, you feel like it's just she's floating almost. She sits and she would always listen to what everyone has to say. She would, you would rarely hear her talk early on in the meeting. She would really get a pulse for the room, make sure that everyone shared their perspective. And at some point, she would just chime in. You could be sure that the entire room would go silent because everyone was keen to hear what she had to say. Because when she spoke, it spot on. There was not too much. It was just a perfect amount. It was just a great way of summarizing what everyone had said,
mhm.
what she heard, etc. And then bring that home in a way where we're like, wow, right?
Yeah,
So to me, compared to other leaders who operate more in that, like, I need to make my point, etc., there was more force, right? And that's what
yeah,
that's why I love the sperm and egg analogy. Is like you have to force it, you have to
yeah,
go through, you have to. Feminine is more, there's no need to prove, there's no need to win. It's just trust yourself, just get this, give the space. There's a lot of nurturing in feminine energy. So give the space for other to express, knowing, deep inside that you are confident in what you have to bring to the table and what you have to say. Uh, and again, this empathy, this ability to read the room and to feel the
Hmm.
energies, which comes more naturally when you're very connected to your feminine energy versus more of that force. So that
Yeah.
is typically like some of the signals. And so practicing feminine energy would be about like just observing what's happening. Who I remember very intuitively, I walk in a room where I don't know people, and I can sense, oh, you're in a bad mood, or you're tired, or you're worried, and so from that point on, give space for that.
Right.
And so some masculine energy needs a space and the stage. It's like, okay, go ahead, do your show
Yeah.
up until the point where it's too much, and when we can
Hmm.
chime in and be like, hey, let me bring this home, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of one analogy that I have when it
No,
comes.
that's great. And I can agree that um, when you do have that much self-control, because I will say it can be hard when, so like in today's world, right? Especially in the virtual world, there's a feeling that we have to get a word in and we have to cut somebody off because we're never going to get our voice into that conversation, especially if you're not on video, right? Nobody can see you wanting to speak. So I think that's just the natural tendency. And it makes for challenging conversations and meetings on a day-to-day basis for sure. But when you can have that self-control and really read the room, and I tell people this too, like when you can pick up on those energies and feelings, and it can completely change the outcome of a conversation if you just slow down and understand that something's off with this person. They might be having a bad day, right? And if we just read that and react to that, and then you can adjust the way you're talking to them.
Yeah.
And that was something I experienced recently too, that there was a conversation where people were kind of like going after this other person unintentionally. It's just they were frustrated, they were taking it on this person, and I called attention to it, and it when the tone changed, the entire outcome of the call changed. But like to your point, when that masculine energy is driving the conversation and you're blind, right? You're blind to those emotions, and I have a problem, I have to get it solved, I don't care who's here, right? um it can be hard. So I don't know if I'm like putting you too much on the spot with all these random questions, but like that was one thing I noticed is I can pick up on those things with people, but not everybody can do that. I've seen that they don't even realize it. They can't hear it. They can't even hear their tone of voice. What kind of advice can you give to the audience on being more how do you get there, right? How do you get more perceptive when it's something that's just not in your nature?
I would say you talk less. The challenge with people not necessarily picking up on energy, first of all, there's obviously a lot of history probably behind this. There is such a thing as emotional disconnect, and like the two sides of our brain have a connection that is more or less wide, uh,
Mhm.
which makes using the two sides of our brain more challenging. So. Um, very, very simply, widening this gap actually can be done through meditation. So again,
Okay.
stillness and groundedness can be done through creative endeavors. I personally love to draw and paint. Um, and I kind of let that aside for a long time. And I'm a mother of a 5-year-old, and we kind of found this passion in common. So now we try to create space for that. But so any form of creativity, it can be writing, it can be. I have a client this morning was telling me how landscaping was something like going creative with what she wanted to do in her,
Yeah.
etc. Like whatever creative endeavor, to just give space for that, and then really not talk. Like learn to really listen,
Yeah.
and not just listen for the words, but what the charge they
Hmm.
they come with. because that's also something that our society is addicted to. It's just like to your point, like
Listening to
trying to
react. I have
contribute.
to react. See, I have to cut you off because I have to react to what you're saying. I'm not
Yes.
listening to your words. I'm listening to answer.
Exactly. And so it's really having this habit, and sometimes it could be a challenge that you put to yourself. Like one of the trick that I'd learned a long time ago is to put the tip of your tongue stuck to your palate when you don't talk, because it makes it just that harder to actually start talking. And so when you catch yourself, you're like, oh, okay, no, I just need to listen. And so there's a lot of different tricks like
Right.
that. Depending on how willing you are to really get to catch the what you're typically not catching in terms of energy, in terms of what's happening, it's a process. The
Yeah.
speed at which you can change that behavior is correlated to how much you want to change that behavior, or how urgent it is for you to change it. So if you're on a PIP, that will become a lot more present and important to you than if it's just, your boss said you talk too much or you interrupt too much, and you just have to go through coaching to do that, or training, whatever.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to be self-aware, right? Um, Being told you have a problem versus recognizing you have a problem are very different things, right? So something else that I've recommended to individuals that I was able to call attention to this issue is find a buddy, right? Find a buddy that you trust that can call attention to these things on the side. There's nothing that you want to be embarrassed about, but when you're doing something or reacting in a certain way, have that person there to back you up and give you that coaching on the side. Or I see that happen a lot, especially with the emerging talent of, again, in this fast-paced world. I literally can see it sometimes in their eyes that they've lost me in the first sentence because they're already 10 steps ahead of me because they're trying to find the next thing to say. So I'll work with them on, like, I think that also it's important to know the people you're working with day in and day out, so that, like, for me to recognize it of this person and then work together proactively. So now I know he's going to be doing this. So I have to take this bite size. Okay, I just told you something. What did I just say? Like, that small steps to say, repeat back to me, or make sure that this is happening correctly. And just, I think it's all about, to your point, making it personal and finding the right blend and approach for that person, because it's not going to work the same for the next person.
Yes, and I think also the limit to that is as you go up the corporate ladder. Like the higher up you go, and the less likely will you find someone who will be willing to tell you that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're the CEO and you interrupt your direct reports constantly, no one will tell you that. And so that's when executive coaching comes into play, and that's when the true leaders, those who really want to get to a higher level, even if they are succeeding, seek coaching. Because as I often say, my job as a coach is not for you to like me. It's for me to help you grow. And I will
Yeah.
tell you the things that no one else will dare tell you. And so that's where having that perspective at a
Mhm.
certain level, you'll need someone external, and you'll need someone like a coach to do that. Because even sometimes your spouse and your best friend won't dare tell you that.
That's a good point. Very good point. All right. I'm going through my list of questions here because
Sure,
it's
sure.
been such a great conversation. I'll make sure I didn't miss anything here. I know we did in our prep session, we did talk about, the flip side, right? So there's all these benefits to this approach, but um, are there any negative or challenging things that you see with this concept? Maybe, I don't know, people being resistant to the concept. I don't know if this makes
Yeah, I
sense.
think I think the biggest challenge is being in an environment that isn't conducive to you bringing up another side energy, right? If you're in a very feminine energy environment and you want to bring up more masculine, and you're going to find a lot of resistance. And there's just different approaches to it. You can decide to just shut down your masculine energy, which I don't think is a good option, but that's sadly what most people do on the flip side, like kind of shrinking our feminine side to fit the masculine work environment. You can start, you can also help influence because that's something with energy. And that's, I'm going to put my husband on the spot again. But that's something that I've noticed in my marriage. When I noticed that I was operating so much from my masculine energy when I was stressed or tired, and that it was resulting in more conflict, I really made an intentional and conscious decision to really watch my energy. And what needed to happen for me was then reduce the opportunities to be in a stressful situation or tired. So I actually, gifted myself an Aura ring 2 years ago to track my sleep, and
Mm.
I got into this habit of really noticing how did I feel when I woke up in the morning. Did I feel rested? I would check my statistics. Yes, you had a great night's sleep. You had enough deep sleep, so you're probably in a great state. Go, you can move all the needles you want. Or like 2 days ago, waking up and having like, half of the like 10% deep sleep versus the 20 I know I need a heat to feel great. And so on these days, I make kind of conscious kind of call out to myself, you're not going to be your best today. So, first of all, reduce any stressors that you can, limit your to-do list, and tell your husband, your daughter, you're not going to be the best version of yourself today, most likely. And this has nothing to do with them. And I just would like them to give me the space to support me in any way I can, because I might be more tense and not as friendly and not as, playful with my daughter, right? So just that gave me the ability to minimize this situation where I would automatically step into my masculine. And what I saw is a response because I was able to operate more from my feminine. My husband tries to step into his masculine and be a different human being in
Mhm.
in the relationship, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, we have a lot more influence with our energy than we think. And to the point you're making, we're kind of the product of our environment, but you can just go with the flow and be swallowed by everybody else's energy, or you can decide to just bring it up in you and influence people around you. And I think what this leader was doing for me at Tiffany was as trickle down to me. And I was like, oh, that's the leader I want to be. I want to be able to operate from that energy and still make a difference and make an impact and hit the KPIs, etc.
Hmm.
When she walked in the room, that's what was happening. Like the room
Yeah.
dynamic changed, even though it would be a 20 people meeting, right? So there's also that, like the moment you're very conscious and intentional, your entire energy can shift how the rest of the organization operates. So that's the downside is like being kind of the anomaly in the
Yeah.
environment, but it's either leave that environment if you really can't figure out a way to bring your authentic self, which by the way is going to be the one who's succeeding more and getting most results in performance in general. Leave that space, or try at least to bring that energy and kind of influence people around you and be kind of magnetized by what you bring to the table, inspired by what you bring to the table. Um, and the third option is the one that I don't recommend, which is try to fit in at all costs. But at
Mm.
times we
Yeah.
have to play the game.
Right.
And if as long as it's intentional and not just a reaction to the circumstances, that can be an option.
Right. Right. Well, this has been really, really fantastic, and I don't want to cut us too short here. So I do want to open it up for questions. Let's see in the chat. I don't know if we had any questions in the chat. We had some lovely comments here, but does anybody have any questions for Caroline? Let's see. Sorry, Brandon had a comment here, I think. Okay, very interesting perspective. I have a colleague of mine who is leading an employee research group called Women of Valor. Cool. The company is called Valorant. She started it because she felt the women in the company weren't speaking up during moments when they needed to. Do you feel feminine energy slash personalities have trouble speaking up in the workplace? And if so, how do they move past that is it necessary to address in your opinion? So lots of questions all in one.
I love this question because that's actually tapped into something we haven't um, fully talked about, which is a common theme I see. So I would say 80% of my clientele you know, associate as being women or feeling very feminine. And so one common thread is what I often call um, not taking yourself seriously enough. I think a lot of women are, whether we want it or not, again, society, culture, family, our surroundings have value kind of masculine energy. And so little boys, we tend to, I think statistically, we tend the compliment given to boys is how smart they are, and girl are beautiful they are, right? Like the just, and so we grow to believe that we are just a, pleasant thing to look at, or more so than we are smart. And while men and boys are told to always go beyond, try harder, etc., etc., so it makes them a lot more confident. They fall a lot more. Like we're more keen to let boy fall than girls, etc. So all of this creates
Mhm,
an environment where I feel lots of women don't take themselves seriously enough, and so here comes the imposter syndrome, and I'm not sure that what we have to say is enough, is valuable enough. And so I think, and that's true for women, but that's true for anyone who was raised thinking, like being told that what they had to say wasn't important, or to just shut up and let the grown up talk all the time, or let your, brother speak first, or your sister speak first, or whatever. But the moment you start, and the sad part is also there's always so much wisdom and greatness that could come out of this mouth if you let it open. Uh,
mhm.
but it's just really overcoming the fear of
Oh
being
yeah.
rejected or being judged or being ridiculed or being criticized, and really believing intimately that what you have to contribute is extremely valuable. And the moment you start, I have a client with whom I was having this conversation, and she was like, you know what, you make me think of my brother. My brother never doubt himself. He will go and pitch, whatever idea he has. He's able to raise money and with things that are okay. But the thing that she is about to bring to the world is monumental, and she doubts herself. And so now the trick has been for her, what would my brother do in the scenario? And so I think there's something very important you're saying here, Brendan, which is yes, I think some of us don't believe that what we have to say is valuable enough, and the risk of saying it out loud is feels too hard of a price to pay, being ridiculed or rejected, or not feeling like we contribute enough. um, Moving past it is often getting a little to the understanding where does that come from, but also practicing. Is there someone? I love the idea of copycat, and so if
Yeah.
there's someone in your surrounding where like who always just goes for it, then just try to tap into that energy, observe what they do, be in their environment, think how they think, like just get in that space. And often the only way is through. And so just speaking up and see what
Mhm.
happens, and
Yeah.
realize, oh, I didn't die. Oh, nobody criticized me. Oh, actually, it added value to the meeting, right? And you do it one time, and you intentionally keep proof for yourself, and you return to that. Um, so that's again, everything can be very personalized depending on the person, but that would be kind of my go-to.
Yeah. Thank you. And something I would just add to that too, in terms of what you mentioned, Brandon. So aside from just having these groups where they focus on women, helping women speak up, it'd be nice to have sort of the flip side of that where we educate men on giving space, right? So kind of, yeah, if women are able to speak up more, or feminine, whatever, it's not, because I see plenty of men with the same challenge, right? To your
Yes.
point, it's all about how you were raised, your parents, your influence, your privilege or not. But it's the flip side of, yes, just making sure that male or female, we're giving other people the space to speak and slowing down and stepping back and allowing that freedom. Because yes, when you have a man or a woman bulldozing a conversation, doesn't matter who's on the other end of the line. They're not gonna they're not gonna get that confidence to speak up because there's no room.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's all about balance. And I know I'm great with that word, by the way. All right.
I think that to the point you're making as well, I don't think a lot of, at least in my experience, even with very toxic, egotistical bosses,
Yeah.
at some point they expect the ping pong. So they're going to go for a monologue for a while. But if everyone stays quiet on the other end, it's going to get nasty. So I also believe in the challenge, I think, is more when you find yourself with like five people who wants to just monopolize the conversation and you're the one not doing it. Um, and so at times, that's why at times it is helpful. It's helpful to understand the dynamic at play and also like
Mm,
the seniority, because obviously there's like etiquettes and rules that you don't want to
right.
bypass. Um, but I intimately believe that the moment you start bringing value to the table, even if you just murmured one time, like one little thing in this big chaos, the work speaks for itself. The value you bring to the table speaks for itself. It's just at some point, if it's just suffocating, it might be the time to consider a different energy, different room. But it really depends on the situation and the circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, if you have the confidence and the right relationship in place too, it's okay to, in the right way, maybe offline, challenge that other personality. Because again, sometimes they're not even aware of it. And if they're in a position of authority where they're used to being treated a certain way, it's just that nobody's done anything different. And I've had the experience where when you bring it to their attention, they're, oh, well, thank you for letting me know. And then the next time they give that space because it's just an awareness thing. So
Yes.
yeah. Well, I don't see any more questions. Does anybody have any more questions? Don't see anything coming through. So
I
uh
saw I saw Evan's comment about being more intentional in the
yeah.
practice. Yeah, way to go. Like it's really it comes down to this. And the moment
Hmm.
you start knowing and noticing that there's this at play, it just add a different layer of reading the room, or reading any interaction. Because we talked about the workplace and I talked about my marriage. That
Yeah.
works in any form of interaction. Um, and actually, as I say this, I'm thinking of my daughter. Watching kids is an amazing,
Oh
amazing
yeah.
way to get inspiration how to do things, especially when
Hmm.
they're young and they haven't been, rewired by society yet.
Yeah.
Looking at and that's an inspiration to me. And my coach often use my daughter as an example, where she not so much now, but up until she was 4 years old, she was fearless. I remember having to hand out flyers for an event I was throwing in local businesses. And there was one where I was like, I don't know if I'm going in this one. I don't know. She was like, we're going in. And I was like, oh God, like now I can't disappoint her because she said we're going in. And I was like, she was just like, let's go. What's the risk? They're gonna say no, And so I think also tapping into the energy of kids, and those who operate from a specific energy,
Yeah.
that can be a great inspiration.
Yeah. And I can certainly say, as I have slightly older children, 9 and 12, it is crazy that you do see that stop, that fearlessness. It just all of a sudden society hits and they're scared and they're not as confident. And it's our jobs, I think, as parents to do our best to try to get them to avoid that and maintain that toddler like fearlessness, if you will.
Yes.
So we got another question, a different kind of question, is which sort of energy is promoted more often, feminine or masculine? And should someone seek to copy one over the other in certain situations? That's a
Well,
loaded question.
that's a loaded question, but that's also a great way to send people back to our chat with Brendan, I think, because that's how I got promoted, right? That's the conversation we had is really looking for the leaders who were two steps ahead of me, so two levels ahead of me, to really understand what they were doing differently. Because one of the realization that I've had and I've shared is, and that's the challenge that I see very often as you go up the ladder of corporate, and even in as a business owner, is there's a stage at which doing more isn't going to get you to the next level. And I was forcefully trying to get promoted to director, and I was doing, I kept on taking on more and doing it excellently and having great connection with the peers in the other departments, thinking like ding ding ding, like this is going to get me the promotion. And when my performance review came and there was nothing about that, I was so pissed, frustrated,
Yeah.
devastated. I was like, I gave so much time and effort trying to just show how much how valuable I am, how much value I bring to the table, etc. And I went to my N2 and be like, what do I need to do? And she said, it's not about doing, it's about being. And look at what to like the level above you, like how they behave, and do more of that versus doing the work. And to me, I was like, the level above wasn't always very inspiring. So to the point that you're making, Brendan, some director was like, I don't want to be that director. I don't want to be that director. And so it was like, let's look at senior directors because that at least I'll have a bigger picture. And there were at that level, there was more consistency into the type of traits that I like, the type of leadership that I like.
Hmm.
So to me, it's always leading with, do I want to be that person when I seek to copy someone? Like, is this who I want to become? And that is the person I will typically like try to understand inside and out, get closer to just then copy up until I can be myself and be like, okay, I did all of this and that's what happened for me for my promotion. I did all of it and I got the promotion. And when I got to that level, it's like, okay, there's a few things that I do not want to do. It's not me and it doesn't feel right for me. And so I adjusted or I fine-tuned and I became
Yeah.
the version of myself I wanted to be at that level. But really trusting who I want to become, because that's the path to any transformation. It's becoming before the doing part.
That is fantastic advice to end us on. So really, I love that and I'm going to use that. Um, so finally, I just want to thank you so much again for all of your time and inspiration and thank everybody for joining us today. This was fantastic and everything I was looking for. So I hope everyone enjoyed it and it was great talking to Carolyn and hope to talk to you again soon.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you
Yeah.
everyone for joining and for the great questions and comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.